What you have just heard is the lovably ridiculous catchphrase of Dave the Barbarian, a Disney animated series that ran from January 2004 to January 2005. Although it saw some popularity during its initial run, the show has since been forgotten by most, and I for one think that's a shame. I personally have some fond memories of watching the show back in the day. Yes, it was a simpler time, when Shreddies were diamonds, the Game Boy had just discovered color, the war was cold, the West had been won, and dinosaurs walked the earth.
Extreme dinosaur!
Yeah, the 90s were weird. Historically inaccurate joke aside, I remember the show being pretty good. However, I'll be the first to admit that shows tend to look better when seen through the rose-tinted goggles that are nostalgia. But throwing aside the sentiment shades and putting on the objective lenses, I think Dave the Barbarian is still a really enjoyable show. But what exactly makes it worth watching after all this while? Well, let's take it back to the medieval times of 2004, and let's take a look at Dave the Barbarian.
The Jabbers!
Taps rolling! So what's the show all about? Well, simply put, our story takes place in the medieval land of Udragoth and follows the adventures of Dave and his barbarian family. So let's introduce the members of said barbarian family. The main character and heroic barbaric lead, Dave showcases all the elements of a classic barbarian. He's big and muscular, fights giant monsters, loves knitting, cooking, poetry, maple dances. Okay, so he's not exactly your typical barbarian, but that's really Dave's defining character trait. Instead of being this awesome barbaric warrior, he's an artsy coward. I mean, in his defense, he never even wanted to be a barbarian.
I never wanted to be a barbarian.
You did when you were 10!
Only because I thought it meant a librarian who also cuts hair.
He's still exceptionally strong and physically capable, but he's always running at the first sight of danger. And man, can that guy certainly run. Seriously, he could teach a class on running away. Oh, well, evidently he did. Overall, his upbeat personality makes him a really likable protagonist, and he brings a sense of culture to these otherwise unsophisticated times.
Look out, people! Here I come!
Most of the time to everyone's dismay. Candy is one of Dave's sisters and also the Princess of Udragoth. Her parents, the King and Queen of Udragoth, left the kingdom to defeat evil across the whole world, and since Candy's the oldest, she was left in charge, leaving a teenage girl in a position of absolute royal power. God, that's a terrifying image. In terms of personality, Candy exhibits many traits of the stereotypical Valley Girl. Now, although this stereotype has bred some of the most obnoxious characters in animated history,
Hello, pathetic wannabes!
I'm gonna place my flag in the proverbial mood and say that Candy is one of the better ones. Yes, she's still really into shopping and hunky guys, but at the same time, she's a barbarian princess. She's kicking ass, she's taking names, she's even got her own lame catchphrase.
Don't mess with the princess!
Yeah, sure, it's okay, I guess, but nothing can top.
The Jabbers!
The youngest of the barbarian siblings, Fang is a hyperactive, violent girl who loves to smash things, despite the fact that she's incredibly puny and often unable to. It's a tale of tragic irony. There's a running gag throughout the show where everyone keeps mistaking her for a monkey.
I don't work on monkeys.
I'm not a monkey!
How long have you been a monkey?
I'm not a monkey!
Brave words for such a small monkey.
I'm not a monkey!
I think it's a bit ridiculous personally. I mean, she doesn't look that much like a monkey.
I'm not a monkey! Bananas!
But then again, she's definitely the most barbaric out of the main cast, and often she's scolding Dave for not acting like a real barbarian. And even though she's small, she is known for her legendary bug squashing skills.
Foolish insects! My bug squashing kung fu is best!
Yeah, she's quite the talented young monkey, isn't she? Uncle Oswich is the master of magic. The relatively skilled sorcerer. Okay, the guy in the family with the wand and hat. He's not exactly a very talented sorcerer, but he makes up for it in other ways. He offers wisdom, support, and an unquenchable hunger for nutlogs. I think they're supposed to be some kind of finger food, but they might just actually be tiny logs. He acts as the barbarian's caretaker while the king and queen are away, yet I don't know why he wasn't left in charge of the kingdom. He's the closest thing to a responsible adult in the family, and he was clearly deemed responsible enough to look after the kids, so I don't see why they didn't just make him the ruler. He's clearly capable enough to— You know, I think I just answered my own question there. Dave's trusty enchanted sword. Now, she may come off as a bit bitter and snarky.
Honey, remind me to get you another brain cell to keep the one you've got company.
But you gotta cut her some slack. She's over 200,000 years old. I mean, she's been around the block, seen her fair share of battles. Now she's stuck hanging out with Dave and his love of gourmet cooking. She's full of sass and has no shortage of snippy one-liners, comebacks, and put-downs.
What's the matter with me?
You want a list?
But then again, what else can you expect when she's voiced by Mrs. Costanza?
Not giving away our water!
This is what we in the business like to call perfect casting. Fappy is the family's pet dragon and plays the role of lovable animal companion. His defining character trait is being dumber than a sack of bricks. And to put it politely, he's not exactly my favorite character. I just find there's not a lot to him. He just sort of flops about making noises half the time, and the other half he's frying Dave to a crisp. It's not that he's really annoying or anything, but on the animal companion tier list, he's not exactly high up. Especially when you compare him to a character like Twinkle the Marble Horse. Okay, look, admittedly, he's not a main character, but it would be a great disservice if I didn't mention him. He's Princess Candy's faithful steed, and to put it simply, he's a rainbow unicorn that talks like Christopher Walken and is plagued by a tortured dark psyche.
I had that dream again. The one where I do terrible things to penguins with a croquet mallet. Shall I tell you of last night's dream? Dark forms came to me, whispering of unspeakable atrocities.
Dude, fuck the tiny dragon. I want to know more about this guy. For a character so dead inside and joyless, he is an absolute joy anytime he's on screen.
I hope this is important. I was busy bemoaning the ghastly, aching void that is my meaningless life.
Someone needs a hobby.
And to think they're just leaving him to rot in the stable when we could be giving him his own Twinkle crime drama. Breaking Twinkle. I'm just throwing it out there. It has potential.
You clearly don't know who you're talking to, so let me clue you in.
In this soulless pit of atrocities we call life, to each of us must come agonizing torments.
But a good cast of heroes needs an equally strong cast of villains to fight. While there are many antagonists that the Barbarians face, the most notable and frequent villain in the series is the Dark Lord
Chuckles, the silly piggy!
Look, there's no big twist here. He's not some invincible master of evil, he's a runty little swine that sounds like Eric Cartman.
Remember, you said no one would ever fall for it? Remember that, huh? Remember? Well, hardy har har, Mr. Smart Guy.
Ma'am, I have to write these lyrics so the plot of Hancock can be realized by the common man.
He's not very threatening, even when he's armed with the mystical amulet of Hog Swineborg, or as he likes to put it.
The mystic amulet of Hog Swineborg!
Honestly, one of the best things about Chuckles is how very human he is. Well, as human as a pig lord can get. Sure, he's the big villain hell-bent on destroying the barbarians and conquering the world, but he's not taken so seriously to the point where he doesn't crack jokes, work part-time, or appreciate some glazed peaches.
I do enjoy peaches.
Do you have this in teal?
Oh no, sorry, just seafoam or melon, sweetie. Blind, I tell you! And my cape is simply ruined. Look at that, that's real silk, you know.
It's these little character moments that make him an enjoyable personality, while at the same time he's enough of a whiny brat that you want to see him get his face kicked in. It's a good balance. Last, but certainly not least, there's the narrator. In other shows where the narrator would simply be a voice filling you in on the current episode, in Dave the Barbarian, the narrator is a rich, robust personality, and more of an active character than you would think. His unique color commentary is far more involved than your average narrator, and he often interacts with the on-screen characters, which leads to many a fourth-wall breaking joke.
Excuse me, have either of you gentlemen seen a princess and a giant zit around?
You want the next cab over?
First, Dave must find Chuckles, the silly piggy, and thrash the living daylight out of him.
Why would I want
We
it?
need to get some action in this story, boyo. A battle. What is going on here?
Chuckles just redid his kitchen floor and,
It would just be such a shame to ruin this elegant Florentine tile.
Fine, make the narrator look like a fool. Who cares?
Oh, don't be that way.
He really does take on a life of his own, and considering that he's a part of every episode, I think he deserves to be called a main character. Dave the Barbarian is a very villain of the week type show. Episodes are mostly self-contained and can be enjoyed independent of one another. Granted, there are reoccurring characters, the villains in particular, however, there isn't really any instance where not knowing the villain beforehand leaves you totally confused. The only real exception is a particular two-part episode, which I'll mention a little bit later. So yeah, Dave the Barbarian is a very villain of the week type show, and the world that they set up complements this format really well. The land of Udragoth is rampant with magic spells, mythical creatures, and a hybrid mix of modern-day and medieval technologies. It's described enough to establish a definable setting, but they leave enough ambiguity to allow themselves to introduce new characters or elements. Knowing how fantastical and weird this world is helps so that new characters don't come off as far-fetched or unbelievable. The world is given just the right amount of development. They've given themselves a lot of creative freedom and they really make the most of it. Personally speaking, I often like my animation snappy and quick. And from its action to its comedy, Dave the Barbarian is very snappy. Now, I'm not saying that animated shows have to be a 24/7 sugar rush. Frankly, shows like that can be unbearable to watch. But a show like Dave the Barbarian keeps things moving along while also knowing when to take pauses. Not only is the show well paced, but it's also fairly clever with its humor. There are a lot of small details that help to enrich many of the jokes. This show is also a good example of being random and spontaneous, but in a tasteful way. I find that random comedy can very easily devolve into tacky nonsense. It can often feel unwarranted, and like the writers are just doing things to desperately keep your attention, like dangling a pair of keys in front of a toddler. In Dave the Barbarian, the random moments are usually very quick. They'll happen, and then we're back to the story. And most of the time, the characters are pretty nonchalant over the occurrences.
Dude, you made it bigger.
Yep, I'd say a good 10%. Do I know you?
It's like an unexpected punch to the face. It leaves you a bit dazed, confused about what just occurred, but in a way that makes you laugh.
Did I mention we have snakes? I want a hot dog.
Buy me a delicious!
The only legitimate criticism I have of this show is that for every bit of good witty writing, there's one type of joke I feel gets overused. I don't know if it has a proper name, but you've probably seen it in a few other places. It's the kind of joke where there's a long dramatic build-up that leads to a weak payoff. Here's an example.
Since the dawn of man, heroes have gone on awe-inspiring quests. Some have braved terrible storms. Some have battled fierce warriors. Hey, Dave. And some have just gone around the corner to the bookstore.
I've seen this type of joke countless times, and personally, I've grown kinda tired of it. But even putting my personal bias aside, the overuse of any joke kills off its enjoyability. The payoff for this kind of joke is supposed to be unexpected, but when you use it often enough, ironically, the punchline becomes predictable. It's like, wow, the supposedly terrifying task wasn't terrifying at all. For like the 12th time, who would have guessed it? That being said, I still think the show has enough good writing to outweigh some of its weaker moments. Speaking of good writing, I'm going to quickly name some of my personal favorite episodes. Girlfriend. Dave falls in love with an evil princess named Irmaplots, who appears in a few other episodes. This story has all the elements of a classic romance. Love, heartbreak, bad poetry, and nutlogs. You can't skimp on the nutlogs. This episode also features one of my favorite and one of the most iconic lines of the entire series.
Thinking quickly, Dave constructs a homemade megaphone using only some string, a squirrel, and a megaphone.
Words alone cannot properly express how much I love this joke. Man of Tomorrow. Far in the distant future of 1994, a lowly zipper tailor named Ned is granted the ability to travel through time with the power of the Time Zipper, a magical zipper created through oddly specific circumstances.
Struck by the mystical powers of the Norse gods, bitten by a radioactive grasshopper, and taught the arcane ability to cloud men's minds by an inscrutable monk.
Ned seeks to conquer the world of the past, and he does this by turning the barbarians into gamers.
Shouldn't we be invading? As soon as I get to level 6.
The best part about this episode is that Ned is voiced by Richard Horvitz, who's best known for voicing characters such as Invader Zim, Billy from The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, and Daggett from Angry Beavers. I just love the way this guy screams.
I'm blind! Destroy us all! Muscular Beaver World's greatest superhero whoosh!
Lederhosen of Doom. Fang is sick of being a tiny weakling, so she decides to go on an all-out training regimen to become the world's mightiest barbarian. Actually, she comes across a pair of lederhosen that grant her super strength. A little less dramatic, but hey, just as effective. And seeing Fang smash things is cool and all, but the real star of this episode is medieval 1970s Uncle Oswich. The Cow Says Moon. Princess Irmaplots returns and seeks revenge on Dave. She lays a curse upon him that makes him transform during the full moon, and he transforms based on whatever he was bitten by last. Needless to say, Dave goes through a series of odd transformations, even becoming Uncle Oswich at a point.
Jinkies, I must raid the fridge, eat an entire ham, and perform magic incorrectly.
I can't help but feel that I've been insulted.
Web. Candy buys a shit ton of stuff on the web. All while forgetting that things tend to cost money. And when a bill-collecting ogre shows up, she finds herself unable to afford it. I guess being princess doesn't pay like it used to. So to pay off her bill, she has to go around collecting debts from other people. While this episode does have one of my favorite moments with the narrator,
A battle? What is going on here?
the real highlight of this episode is the ending. But I don't want to give it away. I really think it's best if you see it for yourself. All I can say is that it's definitely unexpected. A Pig Story. The epic two-part tale that I was mentioning from before. The story involves Chuckles brainwashing the narrator and using his story-controlling powers to take over the show.
He who controls the storyteller controls the universe!
At this point, the fourth wall has officially been demolished. With his control over the narrator, Chuckles is now a legitimate threat to the barbarians. He's effectively become the god of their universe. The weight of their problem definitely gives the story a bit more of an epic feel, at least compared to the other episodes.
Now that is an Avengers level threat.
As the story progresses, the set pieces become simultaneously more ridiculous and more awesome. I don't know if I'd say for certain, but these episodes are definitely candidates for the best in the series. In conclusion, Dave the Barbarian is a lot of fun. From its colorful cast of wacky and lovable characters to its cheeky style of humor, it's a total joy from start to finish. It's honestly a shame that the show didn't run for longer. I guess it just didn't stack up to the bigger names at the time. Within its year-long runtime, the show only amassed 21 episodes, but with that being said, there's still a lot to watch and I definitely recommend that you do. And with that, we have reached the end. So, as per usual, I'm Andyb, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if I make another, I'll see you then. Take it easy.